I'm Francine Prose. I'm a writer.
I'm David Salle. I'm a painter.
I'm Neil Selkirk. I've made all the posthumous prints of Diane Arbus's work.
From David Zwirner, this is Dialogues, a podcast about artists and the way they think.
The one that is chosen is something that was there all along and was just waiting for a moment to come out, and that she found that moment when the thing that was always inside revealed itself.
Being there, seeing this person was chance, but the picture is not by chance. Picture is thrillingly deliberate.
The photograph documents the trust that's been established either over a decade or 2 minutes with the person she's photographing.
I'm Helen Molesworth, your host for this season. Every episode features a conversation with artists, curators, writers, designers, philosophers, filmmakers, and musicians about what it means to make things today. Hey everybody, it's Helen. I'm so happy to be back on the feed to let you know that Dialogues is back. We are in the thick of it right now, getting season 10 ready to drop this winter, but there are so many interesting exhibitions on at the moment that we're releasing a few pre-season episodes for your listening pleasure. First up is a very special roundtable discussion on one of the most singular photographers of the modern era, Diane Arbus. I'm joined by the writer Francine Prose, the artist and writer David Salle, and the photographer Neil Selkirk, the only person to print Arbus's negatives beside Arbus herself. For our listeners in Europe, you guys can catch the new Diane Arbus exhibition called Sanctum Sanctorum on view at David Zwirner London through December 20th, and you can also see the third leg of her traveling retrospective Konstellation, organized by Mathieu Humery, on view at the Gropius Bau in Berlin through January 18th. Remember to stay tuned for more new episodes, and I hope you enjoy this one. I'm so glad to be back. David, Francine, thank you for being here. Neil, thank you for hosting us. And I am going to begin, Francine, by quoting something that you have written, because it so clearly articulated one of the reasons I wanted to have a conversation about Arbus and Arbus's work. So you wrote, "Identical twins," the famous photograph of the two identical twins in the matching dresses. You write, "Identical twins has, like numerous Arbus photos, become an icon, which may not be the most fortunate fate to befall a work of art. Because when we call something iconic, partly what we mean is that it's become possible to see it without looking." And then you go on to discuss what it means to return to the actual object over time, so as not to let it molder in our memory, serving the aims of our memory rather than the aims of the object itself. And so I thought that was a really good way to think about Arbus's work, because they have become so iconic. And I think the recent Konstellation exhibition did a lot of work to sort of break that logic and to let you see the pictures anew, freshly, without the kinds of, assumptions or maybe memories that we have of the pictures. Like I was jolted out of my memory space by Konstellation and felt I was really sort of looking at things for the first time in a long time. And I guess what I wanted to ask both of you is, in looking at these photographs now, photographs that we've all grown up with together, what can we see now that perhaps we couldn't see in the past? Of course, Arbus has no control over the current fate of the photographic image, social media, the internet, the iPhone. But I feel like Arbus's photographs shape our sense of what a photograph is and can be.
I guess I'd like to go back to what you said about it being an icon, because I think that there's a process we go through every time we look at one of these photographs. And the first part of the process is, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I know what this is. And then that kind of melts away. And then we actually start looking. And the thing about, let's just say, art, is that every time you see it, it's something else. You see more, you see differently. Or so for example, I mean, the picture of the twins, you can look at it and say, oh yeah, those are the twins. I've seen this photo. It's quite familiar. And then again, each time, you know, a little difference in the collars, a little difference in the cuffs, a little difference in their expressions. So they keep giving you more as time goes on and as you see with repeated exposures to them. So, you know, in the same way you look at Las Meninas and you go, oh, I didn't notice that the last time.
Right. So is there a sense in your own repeated viewing of them? Are you tracking something in yourself about what you hadn't seen last time? Or are you tracking something in the photograph that you hadn't seen last time?
The photograph. I mean, I keep myself out of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things I love about them is I'm not thinking about myself or my reaction. I'm just seeing this image, usually of these people that I know and that I don't know. In the same way that if you see an actual person, you know them and you don't know them, and you always see something you didn't see before.
Mm-hmm. How about you, David?
The thing that Arbus's photographs argue for the existence of, is the product of this layered, kind of neutral, but let's say tinged with good intentions, neutral perceiving apparatus that registers complexity. I think about how these images are exemplary to the extent to which, as echoing what Francine just said, it's not like I'm changing or growing, but the photograph is already contains so much information, so many valences of empathy and difficulty and pain and triumph and all the rest of it, that I just have to show up. This is responding to something that Arbus wrote, or she's quoted as saying in the text part of the monograph. She insists on what I would call an aesthetic first principle, which echoes very much my thinking, which is that what makes a work of art is its absolute specificity. It is, in every sense, the enemy of generalization.
Mm-hmm.
So the specificity of the work of art is what allows it to generate this multivalent dialogue. It's interesting to see the contact sheet from the Jewish giant shoot, or the boy with the toy grenade shoot. It's very interesting to see the things that were not chosen, and the things that led up to the thing that was chosen. But none of that really alters the fact of the chosen thing was chosen because it's been chosen for maximum compression, complexity, and layeredness. End of story.
Well, the chosen thing, I mean, I think the chosen thing, I love the contact sheets when they were up with the revelation.
Sure, they're great to see.
I mean, you mentioned the little boy with the grenade. And those are the great contact sheets because the little boy is kind of, pleasant and friendly in most of the shots. And one of them, he's like, he gets that grenade and he's ready to just, throw it at you. But what's interesting to me is that it seems like when you look at those contact sheets, the one that is chosen is something that was there all along, was there and was just waiting for a moment to come out. And that she found that moment when the thing that was always inside that little boy or and his parents or whoever just revealed itself. So, I mean, that's why Revelations was such a great title.
Sorry to disagree. I don't know, Francine.
Go ahead.
I think that doesn't give credit to the art. I think that the contact sheets serve to illustrate how different and singular the chosen one is from all the other ones. It will be certainly interesting photographs, maybe great photographs. I mean, that was part of it, of course, you had to be there. But it's so much more than that.
One of the things looking at the contact sheets that I found interesting thinking about is like, what was the status of collaboration between her and her subjects in the images? That the contact sheets seem to show us that, like, she's not a decisive moment photographer. Like, she's not that kind of street photographer, that something is happening between her and her subjects. And, you know, no one is caught in an Arbus image. You know, there's a sense that in many of the images that we're talking about, there's a full frontal gaze. I mean, Eddie Carmel, his parents, the Jewish giant and his parents, is actually remarkably different from many of the other pictures in that they're looking at each other and not at her / the camera / us. But one of the things I wanted to ask you both is if part of what is so difficult and compelling about Arbus's images is that we're actually looking at images of consent, and that consent is not easy. Like, consent is difficult and fraught, and it has a power dynamic, and like consent is an ethical situation, which is so different than, you know, like Gary Winogrand women or something like that. You know, it's like those people are in it with her, and they've agreed to something with her, and she's agreed to something with them.
Of course, that's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of the psychological presence. It always is, whether the photographer acknowledges it or not.
These pictures seem to imply to me that consent is a much more delicate dance. That consent is not about the negation of power, but the handling of power, and the way, what will we do with power when we have it. And Arbus seems to have an enormous amount of power in her hands, in the dark room, in her sense of herself, in her ability to compose herself. And that the pictures really opened up like this ethical dimension of how we are with one another.
I think you're just talking about art. That's what you're just talking about, what artists do.
Yeah.
I don't know if consent is maybe that's the word for it, but the ethical dimension, the operating within the power dynamic, which is a phrase I loathe, but anyway, we'll use it for now. The recognition of all of that is part and parcel of the artist. That's being an artist. The fact that it has to now be enumerated as is kind of symptomatic. When I said I'm not sure they could be taken today, and that in a way doesn't mean anything. Of course, anything can be done at any time. But there's one thing that is, she says in the text, the quotes and excerpts and whatnot. She says something quite moving. I thought that most people live their lives. I'm just paraphrasing, trying to avoid trauma or in fear of trauma, and
it's already happened to
them.
these
people were born with theirs,
right,
and can't escape it, and it's so moving. The acknowledgement of that is inescapable, something which is inescapable. So that would be, I don't know how it would be handled today. We have no idea. I'm not presuming to know, but something tells me it would be handled very differently.
One thing I wanted to float as an idea to see if it has any traction. Because, Neil, you've just done this sort of wonderful thing in Arles where you went through all the things a Diane Arbus photograph is not. Like, you're very, it's like this incredible sort of enumeration. It's not a snapshot. It's not decisive moment. It's not a studio portrait. It's not street photography. So you're
you're trying to, what are these pictures? They're magazine pictures and museum pictures. Like, what are they? And I wondered, this is like a trial balloon idea, is at their strongest, at their most beguiling, are they pictures of emotions or pictures of feelings? Like when we look at the little boy with the grenade, sometimes when I look at that picture, I think like, oh yes, one does feel like that one sometimes. One is on the brink of emotional dysregulation. One is so frustrated. One is so angry. One is not able to control oneself, or we've been circling around the Jewish giant and his parents, the great bewilderment of family, or the suburban couple on the lawn and their boy in the background with his not facing the camera, is leaning over the kiddie pool. Oh, the disappointment of things, like the profoundness. I mean, is she like the August Sander of emotions?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I feel that somehow whatever emotions we imagine these portrait subjects are feeling or we project onto them is sort of the least interesting thing about them in a certain way. I mean, because there's a part of the magic of these photos is that you always feel like she's seeing beyond any of that, beyond the surface, beyond the emotion, beyond the response, beyond to something, I've used this word before, but if such a thing as the soul exists, she's looking at it and she's seeing what it looks like. And that's so much deeper and more profound and more interesting than the various layers of self, personality, dress that are the first things we respond to.
I mean, this sounds like the most utterly banal observation, but the thing about Arbus's photographs, unlike photographs today, is they're in black and white. So they are a priori not reality. This is not reality. This is not life the way it's lived in 14th Street or wherever. This is a black and white image that is constructed. And they're not documentary photographs. So that is already, quite a big difference than the documentarian impulse. I don't know, Francine says something.
Yeah, well, they're portraits. I mean, they're portraits. They're not street photography.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's one reason that Velázquez popped into my head. I mean, you don't get the feeling that like...
He wasn't a street painter.
His own street.
Yeah, I mean, 420 West Broadway way before
it just happened to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get the feeling he was like passing by Pope Leo, the whatever number it was. I mean, there's a kind of contract between the subject and the photographer or the portrait painter, and you feel that in these. And I think you're right. I mean, the subjects never look as if they're being taken advantage of, or as if any of the things that, et cetera. I mean, they're frontal photographs, as you said. They're frontal photographs, and there's a very clear something's happening, and they know it, and the photographer knows.
I have a question, Neil. Did the model sign releases?
Sometimes, depending if she knew she was taking a picture in a relatively formal situation, she would get a release if she could. She mostly didn't care. I mean, she chose not to worry about it. She took the picture. Yeah. I mean, she absolutely wasn't thinking about that. When she was taking a picture, the purpose of what she was doing was to take the picture. The picture was to be an end result.
Right.
But her personal bearing, the way she conducted herself, is the way she conducted herself always with everyone, which was to immediately evince profound interest, and it was sincere in the person to whom she was talking and who she was going to take the photograph of. Her technique was established so she did not have to think about the camera and the equipment when she took the picture. She had a developing, ongoing relationship to the person with whom she was conversing, and at a certain point, she took the photograph. The photograph documents usually the trust that's been established either over a decade or 2 minutes with the person she's photographing. Something that I've only just become aware of after 55 years of being involved in this is the realization that nobody ever talks about the physical characteristics of these photographs. The fact is, and this refers to something you asked about before, Helen, that she did think very deeply. She devised the way the pictures were going to look with the express purpose of making the pictures believable, that they would be a truth. She did this by using technical devices or pictures that are accepted as truth. They look like press photographs with a flash sometimes. They look like snapshots sometimes. Everybody believes both those two genres.
Right.
She made sure that people knew that she had not cropped the photographs by including the borders. All these things have the effect of making the picture believable, a truth. Then you combine that with choosing subject matter that is what most people talk about most of the time, and the relationship between the photographer and the subject, which is disturbing and extremely striking. You present it as an absolute truth, and the viewer has nowhere to hide. What she did is she terrified us by showing us that we couldn't escape from the truth that her picture was, and that had never been done before. These pictures look casual in many ways. They are not. They may be chance in and of themselves, but they are incredibly carefully constructed before to enable chance to have its opportunity.
I think was always taking pictures of what makes people interested. You know, I mean, she said, you know, she's taking pictures of people or things that people wouldn't see otherwise. But that boy is incredibly interesting. I mean, you could look at that photo and mysterious. I mean, all these photos, the mystery of them, you can look at them and, I mean, sort of that's what I meant at the beginning, is that every time you go back, there's something, you know, it's like reading a poem or something. You think like, in a moment, I'm going to figure out what this is, but you don't. And part of the pleasure of it is that you don't, and you finally don't want to. It's just what's there is what you get. But I wind up being sort of incredibly grateful to these photographs for doing just what she said, which is these are all people, these are all things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, that I never would have seen. And now they're like installed in my brain. And this, I mean, one of the things about the Constellation show was that I'd seen so many of them. And when I think about her photos, it's like I have a little flip card in my brain, and I can just go, and there are very few photographers actually that I can call up so many images like that. I mean, you know, the great photographers, 3, 4, I can see. But with Arbus, I could, without thinking for a minute, there are like 20 pictures that go through my head.
Yes.
And what is that? I don't know.
Well, but we should ask her, why are they memorable as opposed to someone else's pictures? I think they're memorable because they're good, which might be a tautology, but it's also true. They're just better. They're memorable because they're perfect, and they're perfected works of art that we tend to remember. We've all seen a billion photographs, and most of them are interesting when you encounter them, and you forget them immediately. And so things have to rise to this level of intention, of deliberate artfulness that makes them memorable more than just the empathic subject.
Yeah. I mean, she has a funny relationship to empathy. She wrote, "What I'm trying to describe is that it's impossible to get out of your skin into somebody else's. And that's what this is all a little bit about, that somebody else's tragedy is not your own." Which, I mean, in a way, these pictures, I think, are filled with empathy, but she's skeptical about empathy. If empathy means, putting yourself in someone else's shoes,
that's actually not what it means in terms of art. As a term of art, it means simply what it allows you to think and feel, and doesn't actually have anything to do with the object of the photograph. It's a little bit the problem, the Wittgenstein problem of it's impossible for someone to know someone else's pain.
Right.
You think you can, but of course it's impossible.
But I think these pictures act like maybe you can, but you also, she's saying you can't.
You don't need to. That's not how it works. That's not what empathy means as a term of art. It's that thing which can never totally be accounted for, the transformation that art makes.
It comes down to the non-judgmentalism, which was one of the topics in art. And somebody came up to me in the show here when that show came to the Armory and said, "Really? She's really not judgmental?" And I said, "Correct. It took me decades to get there. But she is not."
To get where? That you weren't judgmental?
To get to the position that she was not being judgmental. She was super aware that sometimes she took a picture and the picture was scary in the way the person looked. But she said photographs can be very cruel, but she was willing to live with the fact that it was a fact, and she wasn't judging the subject when she printed the photograph. She was saying, this is a fact, and it's an extraordinary fact, and we should look at it and see what we can derive from this fact.
And so is that what the purpose of it is when you say that's...
No, well, it's what the purpose of it... I mean, judgment would be a purpose, but that's not... I mean, I think one of the great things that you said, Neil, or maybe I'm imagining you said this, is that she didn't have an agenda. So, right? So judgment and provoking judgment and having judgment is an agenda. Or empathy is an agenda.
The agenda is to make art.
The agenda is to make art. But, to make the reader feel empathy, that's like that's a way to make a photograph less than great right away. And when I think about even photographers whose work I admire, there's a certain amount of, and I'm not going to say who they are, but there's a certain amount of agenda in it, political agenda, emotional agenda, whatever. And these don't. I mean, I don't think that you can call mysteriousness an agenda. No. You just can't. I don't think you can call the lack of judgment an agenda. I don't think any of those things. So I think it's just, it's something like, it's much simpler than that. It's like, this exists, this existed, this is, and I saw it. And now you're going to see it and you're going to remember it.
Part of the objective is to make a photograph that will be recognized as a great photograph. But overwhelmingly, she was doing it through the process of recording things that she felt she had a unique access to through her own thinking. And you were actually quoting her without realizing it just then, Francine, when you said, I was there, I saw it.
Right.
That's what she wanted to share, was that she was confronted with something amazing and she wanted to share it. And she devised very deliberately a way to make you believe what she had seen. There was she once said this wonderful thing about Ansel Adams, about how everything prior to her that was on a museum wall was the work of an artisan demonstrating their skills. And that subconsciously, everybody going to a museum before Arbus was looking at pictures that they knew were the skilled manipulation of an artisan. And she set about doing the exact opposite. They weren't skilled manipulations, they were real. Boom.
Right, but look at this picture. Look how much different the picture would be without the striped background.
But she was going to take that picture anyway.
Yeah, of course, but she got lucky.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
It's chance. Yeah. Chance is an absolutely key
Sure.
ingredient
Sure.
of almost all great photographs.
Right, but you have to recognize when
that's exactly
Right.
it. It's the ability of the photographer
when luck smiles on you, when fortune smiles on you.
To know when it happened. Yeah.
I mean, not just the striped background, but this, whatever that
Yeah, there's some sort of
tinsely
flowers behind
fake flower thing is. And then, lest we forget this
the
dog's doleful dog face.
I mean, the element,
but it's all of those elements together.
The element of chance was what convinced the 19th century art world.
Yeah, that it wasn't important.
That it wasn't art.
Of course.
When in fact, photography's innate characteristic that all its inventors recognized immediately and then had to suppress was that chance, the understanding of chance and how to use it was fundamental to the medium.
Yeah.
Even though I think some of the technical things that you described that she does, Neil, work a lot to mitigate the feeling of chance in the picture. Like there's a feeling of such inevitability in the picture, right?
Yeah.
You know, that so that she's using it as a force, but also tempering it, it seems to me, so that the picture...
Or strengthening it.
Tempering is a form of strengthening,
there
right?
you go. Okay.
Yeah.
It can be.
Again, that's the artfulness. Being there, seeing this person was chance, but the picture is not by chance. Picture is so thrillingly deliberate.
Yeah.
Francine, in terms of the Constellation show, did you think that the kind of chance encounter with the image that happens because of the curatorial conceit, that they're not in series, they're not chronological, so you don't know what you're going to see as you move around. Like there was no rhythm in that show where you thought, oh, now I bet on the other side of this will be the crying baby, or some of the images that we carry in our head. Do you think that show worked to query or make them less iconic?
I don't know. I don't know. The show, I was glad to see so many photos that I hadn't seen, but it made me feel sort of autistic in a way. That is, I was so distracted. I thought this is what it's like. I was so like, oh, that one, that I couldn't. My ideal of my dream Arbus show was the one at the Whitney, right? When was that, Neil?
You mean at the Met Breuer?
Yeah. The Met Breuer, right.
It was the called in the beginning, where all the pictures were on individual walls.
All the pictures were on pillars, on on the opposite sides of the pillars, so that your experience of the photo was very particular, very intimate, and there was everything else disappeared. And I think the Constellation show for me, everything else was there all the time, including myself in the mirror, which is like, oh. So I would much rather. I think it's really important and interesting to get away from the sort of death march around the walls of the gallery, which that tried to do. But I think that the Met Breuer show was a much more, in terms of seeing the photographs, for me, was a much more useful way of getting around that traditional way of thing, because I wasn't distracted. It was as simple as that.
Right. I have one last question that I wanted to put on the table for you, because Arbus, is very involved in magazine culture. But I'm just curious about, I don't know, if any of you have any thoughts about the distribution of photographs, for how people would have received Arbus photographs, in a glossy, in the kind of that weird sense of leisure time that a magazine implied, a sense of being cosmopolitan that a magazine always implied, a sense of being in the friction and in the spiciness of the moment.
Well, she needed to work for magazines in order to make money, in order to eat.
Right.
And she approached magazines with story ideas, with concepts, with photographs.
Right.
The first two big things that she did, which were in Esquire and Harper's Bazaar, were absolutely her pictures, which she conceived of, she took, so they were her art. And then magazines started coming back and saying, hey, we need you to take a picture of this,
Right.
need to take a picture of that.
Yeah.
And she did it because she was going to be paid and she needed to be paid. She obviously brought herself to it. I'm not aware that she ever modified her approach to what she was photographing in order to accommodate the needs of a magazine, meaning she did what she was going to do. But sometimes it was completely impossible to take an Arbus picture of what she'd been asked to do. That when they were putting together the magazine work book, which was done in a way as a sort of defense to try and protect the work as much as they could, Marvin Israel said to me, the book is being done to prove that she could take bad photographs, which was sort of a joke, but it was also, there was a real nub there of meaning she took the pictures, they paid her the money, and she walked away. It did not mean that she was going to want to stick it on a wall anyway.
But magazines were the patron,
Right.
right? Much more than museums.
Yeah.
Just as they were the patron for fiction. So there was no contradiction between reading a story in a magazine that would later be anthologized or seeing a great picture.
Right.
I mean, almost all of Abaddon was done for editorial work.
Right.
I just see it as that was the distribution patronage system of the time, and museums were kind of late to the party. Now it's all gone. Do we have anything replacing it? I don't know.
The experience of looking at something in a magazine is very different from seeing it it's private. It's private. So you're not like waiting for someone to finish taking a selfie in front of the magazine photograph that you're looking at. It's just you and that image. So I think that it somehow recreates more than seeing it on a gallery wall, the experience of being in that photograph, of taking the photograph.
I might be a shallow person, but I always preferred looking at photographs in books and magazines than on the wall.
Me too.
Yeah.
Even if the quality is much degraded, I just love the experience of holding it in my hand and looking at it.
Me too. There's something about it literally sort of like being in your lap, that is so
It's
intimate
private.
and so, quiet. The privateness that you're registering, yeah.
So we've been talking about Diane Arbus, and I always think it's nice to let the artist have the last word. She was a particularly wonderful writer. And I'm choosing a really early piece of hers. It's from her senior English paper for high school, and she was writing about the Bible. And I found it, after I read it, it was just a really interesting way of thinking about her pictures. She has a kind of clarity of thinking for a young person that I found remarkable. So here is Arbus on the Bible from her senior high school paper, and I'm reading you the passage as it's found in the book Chronology. It is man's creation, like the desperate attempt of a race of men faced with things they couldn't understand, to account for it all and be able to believe in what they had created. They were made and placed on earth, and faced with substance and space, with wet and dry, with soft and hard, with big and small, with dark and light, with pain, with unhappiness, with hunger, with desire, and they couldn't understand it. Everything was so wonderful and so horrible that they have to have something to make them know that everything would be all right. A man cannot believe in what he doesn't understand at all. A man cannot believe in nothing. A man must have a sense that there is an order behind everything, good and bad, an order which is bigger than himself, but which he can at least, in part, understand. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dialogues is produced by David Zwirner. If you like this episode, please follow, rate, and review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really does help the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you join us here next time.